The flames of a raid still burned in the distance when the Apache chief pulled the trembling girl into safety. His chest heaved, blood streaking his arm, yet his voice was calm, almost commanding. Leaning close, he whispered words that froze her in place. "We need to make a baby now. Why would a leader, moments after saving her life, demand such a thing? And what secret forced him to bind her fate to his in that very instant?" The desert night carried the acrid smell of smoke and iron. Behind them, the canyon echoed with gunshots fading into silence, the last raider's cry swallowed by the wind. The Apache chief stood tall, his figure outlined against the dying firelight. Beside him, the young girl clutched the torn edge of her dress, her breath shallow, her eyes wide from what she had just witnessed. Minutes earlier, she had been dragged by merciless hands toward the riverbank, her fate sealed by men who saw her as nothing but spoil. And then, out of the darkness, he came. The chief, feared even by enemies, had cut through them like a storm. His blade flashed, his rifle roared, and in moments the ground was littered with the bodies of those who thought her helpless. Now, with the raiders scattered, silence pressed in. The girl trembled, torn between gratitude and terror. She had been saved, but by whom? A man her people spoke of in hushed tones, a leader known for his ruthless strength, whose word alone could decide life or death. He turned toward her, his breath ragged, his gaze steady. His hand, still stained with blood, brushed her shoulder, not gently, but with the weight of command. "Your life is safe," he said. His voice was low, gravelly, carrying both reassurance and authority. But safety alone is not enough. She stared at him, unsure whether to step back or lean closer. What do you mean?" she asked, her voice cracking. His dark eyes locked onto hers, steady and unyielding. "A tribe without children dies. A leader without legacy falls. Tonight, I saved you, and now you will save us both. We must make a child." Her breath caught. The words hung heavy between them, more shocking than the clash of steel, more dangerous than the fire still glowing on the horizon. She searched his face for cruelty, but found none, only desperation, the weight of a man carrying his people's survival on his shoulders. Torn between fear and fate, she realized that her life had changed forever in that single moment. And what she answered next would bind her not just to him, but to the destiny of an entire tribe. The night pressed down heavy after the chief's words, but the girl could not move, her legs frozen as if the desert earth itself had claimed her. She had known danger before, raiders, hunger, even the cruelty of her own people in moments of weakness, but never had she faced a choice that felt so impossible. Her name was Ayanna, eternal blossom, though life had given her little softness. She had been taken at dawn, pulled from her family's small camp while her father and brothers were away hunting. The raiders tied her wrists, dragging her across dry ground with the same indifference they might show a broken horse. They spoke of selling her, trading her for whiskey, using her to break the spirit of her people. For hours, she prayed for death to come swiftly, but death did not come. Instead, the chief appeared. To the raiders, he was not a man but a storm, a figure whose very presence turned courage into ash. The way his knife cut, the way his rifle cracked, it was as though the earth itself rose to defend her. When the dust cleared, their blood fed the soil, and Ayanna still breathed. Now standing in the hush of the canyon, she could barely look at him. His chest rose and fell with controlled fury, his long braids streaked with sweat and dust. He had saved her, yes, but why? She was not from his tribe. She was not anyone of importance. The chief's gaze stayed locked on her, his words replaying in her mind. "We must make a child." She swallowed hard, her heart hammering. "I am not yours," she whispered, voice shaking. His expression did not change. "You are alive, and that makes you mine for now." She flinched at the weight of his tone, but beneath the harshness was something else. Urgency, a need that reached deeper than desire. She dared to meet his eyes, and what she saw startled her. There was no hunger in them, no cruelty. There was only fire, the kind that burned to keep the dark away. He lowered himself onto a fallen log, his body weary, blood staining his sleeve where a blade had cut deep. For a moment, he looked less like a conqueror and more like a man bearing the burden of many lives. "My people are fading," he said, voice heavy. "Each raid takes more than it gives. Children are few. Mothers weep for sons not yet grown. A tribe without blood to carry forward is no tribe at all. I cannot let my people vanish into smoke." She listened, torn between anger and sympathy. He spoke with conviction, but still, Why her? Why bind her fate to his so suddenly? You have your women, she said softly, bitterness threading her words. Why me? The chief's jaw tightened. His gaze drifted toward the flames licking the canyon wall, then back to her. Because the spirits chose. I saw it in your eyes when I pulled you from their hands. You were not broken, though you should have been. You still fight. Ayana's lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong. Yet deep down, she knew he had seen something true. Even in the raider's grasp, she had not yielded. She had prayed. She had planned. She had waited. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hiss of cooling embers. At last, he rose, stepping closer. His height towered over her, his shadow long against the ground. I do not ask for your love, he said, voice lower now, but I ask for your courage. Stand with me, and you will not only live, you will carry forward a fire no enemy can put out. Her chest tightened. The chief's words bound her in a web of duty she had never asked for, yet could not dismiss. He was not offering choice. He was offering survival for both of them, for his tribe, perhaps even for her own bloodline. But survival at such a price. Her mind raced with questions. Would her family ever see her again? Would she be shunned by her own people if she bore the child of another tribe's leader? And what if his vision of the future was nothing more than desperation disguised as destiny? The chief seemed to sense her turmoil. He did not press closer, did not seize her. Instead, he stepped back, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the canyon. Think on it, Ayana. The raiders are gone, but the world is not safe. With me, you live. Without me. His voice trailed, leaving the end unspoken. He turned then, his silhouette etched against the dim glow of firelight, a figure of both salvation and fear. Ayana stood frozen, her heart torn between gratitude and terror, and as the night closed in, one truth became clear. Her life had been spared, but her freedom was no longer her own. The dawn came slow, the first light spilling across the canyon walls in streaks of golden red. Ayana had not slept. She sat curled against a stone, her eyes heavy, her heart restless. Every time she closed them, the chief's words echoed, "We must make a child." The demand was more haunting than the screams of the raiders. The chief moved with quiet purpose, as though the night's violence had not touched him. He fetched water, cleaned his blade, and tended to the wounds on his arm with practiced hands. He did not glance at her often, but when he did, his gaze carried the weight of both leader and man. She watched him cautiously. He was not young. His face bore lines carved by years of sun, battle, and loss, but there was strength in every movement, a certainty she had never seen even among her own people. And yet, beneath the armor of his presence, she caught glimpses of something else, weariness, sorrow. When he finally spoke, his voice carried more reflection than command. "I had a son once." Ayana stiffened. The words were unexpected, and the softness in his tone startled her. The chief's eyes fixed on the horizon, his jaw tightening as memory stirred. He was strong, bold. He carried the fire of our ancestors in him, but the sickness came one winter, silent and cruel, took him before his 10th spring. His hands clenched around the leather strap he was binding. I buried him myself. I told my people the spirits had called him early. But inside I knew, if our children fall, the tribe will fall. Each death takes us closer to nothing. Ayana lowered her eyes. She knew the truth of loss. She remembered her mother's voice fading with fever, her youngest sister's cries ending too soon. Death had stolen from her too, and yet, hearing it from him, this man feared for his ruthlessness, softened the iron in his words. Still, her heart rebelled. "And you think forcing me will fix this?" she asked, her voice trembling but steady. His gaze cut to her, sharp but not cruel. "Not forcing, choosing. The spirits chose you, I only speak what they showed." She shook her head, anger prickling her skin. "Spirits may guide, but I am not cattle to be traded for children. My body is mine." For a moment, silence stretched. The chief did not move, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Strong words, the kind I expected from you." Ayana blinked, caught off guard. She had braced for anger, for violence, but instead, he looked almost satisfied. "You fight even me," he said, voice low. "That is why you live. A woman who bends at every word cannot carry a tribe. A woman who resists, even when afraid. She carries fire. His words tangled in her chest, both insult and strange respect. She wanted to spit back, to tell him she would never be his. Yet part of her, the part that had stared death in the face and refused to break, understood what he meant. Still, her fear clawed at her. "If I refuse?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The chief's eyes held hers. "Then I return you to your people if they still live. You walk your own path, but the raiders will come again, and next time, I may not be there." Her throat tightened. Freedom dangled before her, but it was painted with danger. He offered no cage, only a choice between two paths, each shadowed with its own cost. The day passed in silence. They walked the canyon trail, his pace steady, hers cautious. He led her to a small clearing where wild horses grazed, the sight almost too peaceful for a world so broken. "Why tell me your story?" she asked suddenly, unable to carry the silence any longer. The chief ran a hand along the stallion's neck, his touch unexpectedly gentle. "Because if you are to carry my fire, you must know the ashes I come from." His words sent a shiver through her. She turned away, torn between the weight of his grief and the chains of his demand. That night, as they sat by the fire, Ayanna stared into the flames, her thoughts a storm. He had saved her life. He had shown her his wound, the death of his son, and yet he asked something of her she was not ready to give. Her heart whispered of freedom, of running into the night, risking the desert and its dangers, but her eyes kept returning to him, the man who carried both cruelty and sorrow, whose vision for his tribe was both terrifying and strangely noble. For the first time, she wondered if her fate was not theft, but trial, and whether surviving it meant finding strength in a place she had never looked before. Ayanna learns of the chief's tragic past and begins to understand the desperation behind his demand. Yet understanding only deepens her turmoil. Should she resist him, or is her survival bound to his fire? The third day on the trail carried them deeper into the high desert. The air was thin, dry, filled with the scent of sage and dust. Ayanna walked a few paces behind the chief, her wrists now untied, though her freedom still felt uncertain. Each step pressed the question harder. Was she following by choice, or because fear held her tighter than any rope? The chief moved with the rhythm of a man who had spent his life in these lands. His eyes caught every track in the dirt, every shadow on the ridge. He paused often, scanning the horizon, not for her sake alone, but for the safety of all who depended on him. She saw it then. He was never only a man. He was a leader who could not afford weakness. As the sun rose high, he stopped by a cluster of mesquite trees. He knelt, pressing his palm to the soil, then gestured for her to do the same. Hesitant, she crouched beside him. "Feel this," he said quietly. The earth was cracked, dry, lifeless. "No rain for many weeks," he continued. "The people wait for crops that will not come. Children go hungry. That is why I fight, why I demand." His voice carried both anger and despair. "I cannot command the clouds, but I can command life." Ayanna's throat tightened. His reasoning was ruthless, but it was not hollow. He was a man fighting against time itself, desperate to leave something behind before both his body and his people gave way to dust. And yet, she could not simply surrender to his vision. "Life without choice is not life," she said, her voice firm despite her fear. "You speak of children, of fire, but what of me? Am I only a vessel?" His gaze snapped to her, sharp as a blade. For a long moment he said nothing, then his eyes softened, just barely. "You are more. That is why I chose you. A woman of spirit bears not only children, but strength." The words unsettled her. They were both a compliment and a chain. They camped that night near the ruins of an old stone outpost, its walls crumbled and overtaken by weeds. The chief built the fire while Ayanna gathered water. When she returned, she found him staring at the flames, his usually steady face shadowed with thought. She sat across from him, curiosity overcoming caution. "Do you always carry your people's weight alone?" His eyes lifted to hers, weary but unwavering. "A chief does not carry alone, but he must be first to bear it. If he falters, all falter." She tilted her head, studying him. "And who carries you?" The question seemed to strike him deeper than she intended. His jaw worked, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked away, as if the fire's glow revealed too much. "No one," he said at last. "Not since my wife." Ayanna stilled. She had not expected that. She died giving birth, he continued, his voice low, roughened by memory. I buried her with the child. Since then, I carry both their shadows. The silence that followed was heavy. Ayana felt the sting of pity rising in her chest, but she shoved it down. This was a man who demanded strength, not sorrow. Yet knowing his grief explained the steel in his voice, the hunger in his demand. You have lost much, she said softly, but loss does not give you the right to take from me. His eyes met hers, and for once, he did not argue. Instead, he nodded, as if her defiance confirmed what he already believed, that she was the fire he sought. Later, when the night deepened and the stars stretched endless above, Ayana lay awake listening to the chief's breathing. It was steady, controlled, yet she sensed he did not sleep easily. Perhaps, beneath all his strength, he was still a man haunted by ghosts. For the first time, she felt something shift in her chest. Fear still held her, yes, but alongside it grew a strange, dangerous understanding. He was not only the ruthless leader her people whispered about. He was also a man broken and rebuilt by loss, holding on to power not for himself, but for those who would die without it. And that realization unsettled her more than any threat, because if she saw him as only a monster, resistance would be simple. But seeing him as both man and leader, strong and wounded, made her question where her hatred ended and where something else might begin. The fourth morning dawned sharp and cold. The sky washed pale above the desert. Ayana woke to the sound of hoofbeats, faint but fast, echoing across the canyon floor. She sat upright, her heart pounding. The chief was already on his feet, rifle in hand, his eyes narrowed toward the horizon. Raiders, he said simply. Her blood chilled. Again, they hunt what they lost, he replied, his voice steady. They will not stop until one of us lies dead. The hoofbeats grew louder. Dust rose in the distance. 3 riders, then 5, then more. Their shouts carried on the wind, harsh and mocking. Ayana's stomach twisted, the memory of their hands dragging her across the ground still raw. The chief loaded his rifle with practiced calm. Stay close, use your bow, aim for the horse if you cannot strike the rider. Ayana swallowed hard but nodded. Fear pressed heavy in her chest, yet something stronger rose with it. She had seen him fight, seen how he stood like stone against the storm. If she faltered now, she would be nothing more than the helpless girl they had tried to break. The raiders thundered closer, rifles flashing in the sunlight. The chief raised his weapon, firing once, clean and sure. One rider toppled from his saddle, crashing into the dust. Ayana's bowstring sang, her arrow slicing through the air. It struck a horse's flank, sending the beast rearing, its rider tumbling hard to the ground. Gunfire cracked, splinters flying from the rocks where they sheltered. The chief moved like a man born for battle, every motion efficient, every shot deliberate. He shifted to cover her when bullets rained too close, his body a shield as much as his rifle was a weapon. Ayana loosed another arrow, her hands trembling but steady enough to send the shaft into a raider's arm. He howled, dropping his weapon as his horse carried him away. For the first time, she felt the sharp rush of power. She was not only surviving, she was fighting back. The skirmish raged for long minutes, dust and smoke filling the air. At last, the remaining raiders faltered, retreating into the canyon with curses on their lips. Silence returned, broken only by the harsh rhythm of breathing. Ayana lowered her bow slowly, her arms aching, her chest heaving. The chief stood beside her, scanning the horizon until the last rider vanished. Only then did he lower his rifle. "You fight well," he said, his tone flat but carrying a weight of respect. She met his gaze, her pulse still racing. "I fought because I had to." His lips pressed into the faintest shadow of a smile. "That is the only reason worth fighting." For a long moment, they stood in the aftermath together, dust settling around them, the ground marked with tracks and blood. The air between them shifted, less sharp, less bound by fear. They had faced death side by side, and neither had broken. Later, as they tended to their wounds, Ayana found herself studying him in a new light. His hands, rough with scars, moved carefully as he bound a cut on her arm with a strip of cloth. He worked without flourish, his touch firm but not cruel. For a man who carried himself like stone, there was surprising care in the way he tied the knot. "You protect even me," she said softly, almost accusing. His eyes lifted to hers, steady and unyielding. "You are under my fire now. Any who strike you, strike me." The words sank deep, stirring something she could not name. She looked away quickly, afraid of what he might see in her eyes. That night, the fire crackled low as the desert cooled around them. Ayana sat with her bow across her lap, staring into the flames. The chief sat opposite, sharpening his knife, his gaze fixed on the blade, but his mind clearly elsewhere. Finally, she broke the silence. "You speak of children, of legacy, but what if I cannot give you what you want?" His hands stilled. He looked up slowly, his face unreadable. For a long moment, she feared anger. But instead, his voice came quiet, almost weary. "Then you give me what you already have, your fire. Even if no child comes, the tribe must see that strength. They must believe it still lives." Her breath caught. His demand was more than flesh, more than womb. It was spirit, survival, hope, and somehow that terrified her even more, because spirit was something she could give. As the fire burned low, she lay awake, her thoughts restless. The chief had shown her his grief, his burden, and now his respect in battle, and though her fear had not vanished, it had changed. He was no longer only captor or savior. He was becoming something far more dangerous, someone she could almost begin to trust. The desert lay silent after the clash, the tracks of fleeing raiders already fading beneath the wind. Ayana sat near the stream, dipping her bruised hands into the cold water. The sting grounded her, reminding her she was alive, not only because the chief had fought, but because she herself had stood and struck back. Across the clearing, the chief knelt by the fire, cleaning his rifle. The lines of his face were deeper tonight, his jaw taut, his shoulders heavy. The battle had taken its toll, though he would never admit it. He moved like stone, but Ayana was learning that even stone cracks under enough weight. "You bleed," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the hush. He looked up, startled, then glanced at his arm where blood had soaked through the bandage. He shrugged. "It will heal," she frowned, standing and walking toward him. Without asking, she knelt and reached for his arm. He stiffened at her touch but did not pull away. Her fingers worked carefully, untying the cloth, revealing the angry red gash beneath. "You should rest," she murmured, his dark eyes fixed on her face, unreadable. "A chief does not rest while his people still bleed." Her hands paused. "And what am I? Not your people." The words hung sharp between them. His gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "Not yet," he admitted. "But you fight as though you are." She tied the bandage tighter, anger and confusion swirling inside her. She wanted to hate him, to push him away. Yet the more he revealed, his grief, his burden, his unexpected respect, the harder it became. He was not only the man who demanded a child, he was also the man who shielded her body with his, who bled beside her, who carried the weight of lives on his shoulders. When she finished, he caught her wrist gently, his hand rough against her skin. "Why help me?" Her breath caught. For a moment, she could not answer. At last, she whispered, "Because I do not want to watch another man die while I still live." Something passed between them then, wordless, heavy, undeniable. He released her slowly, his eyes lingering, his silence louder than speech. That night, the fire burned low. Ayana lay awake, listening to the steady rhythm of his breath beside her. She turned on her side, watching his silhouette against the stars. Her chest tightened with thoughts she dared not name. Gratitude, fear, something dangerously close to longing. At dawn, they continued their journey. The land grew harsher, jagged cliffs, long stretches without water. Ayana stumbled more than once, exhaustion gnawing at her. Each time, the chief slowed, adjusting his pace without a word. Once, when her knees buckled, he caught her arm, steadying her. "You are strong," he said. "I feel weak," she admitted, breathless. "Strength is not the absence of weakness," he replied. "It is walking despite it." His words lingered long after he released her arm. By evening, they reached a plateau overlooking the valley. The chief built the fire while Ayana gathered sagebrush. The sky bled into orange and purple as the sun fell, the horizon painted with beauty she had no strength left to admire. They sat close to the flames, the air cool, the silence softer than before. Finally, Ayana asked the question that had burned in her chest since the first night. "Why me? Truly, do not speak of spirits. Speak as man." The chief's gaze lifted to hers, steady, unflinching. "Because when I found you, I saw no fear in your eyes, only fire. You were bound, beaten, yet unbroken. A woman like that does not belong to death." She belongs to life. Her breath caught, her heart pounding. She wanted to deny it, to call his words a trick, but she could not. She remembered the moment he had pulled her from the raider's hands, remembered the fire in her chest that had refused to die. Still, fear gripped her. "And if I say no," he leaned closer, his voice low, steady as the earth, "then you walk free. I will not chain you. But know this, whether you stay or leave, the fire between us is already lit, and fires cannot be unmade." Ayana's pulse raced. She looked away, her chest tight with conflict. He had given her freedom in words, yet bound her in truth, because he was right. Something had begun between them, something she could neither deny nor escape. That night, as the fire dwindled, she lay restless. His presence was too close, his words too heavy, her heart too loud. And for the first time, she admitted the truth to herself. She was no longer afraid of him alone. She was afraid of what she might feel for him. The sun climbed high the next day, pouring heat down over the plateau. Ayana walked beside the chief in silence, her thoughts tangled. His words from the night before echoed within her. The fire between us is already lit. She hated how true they felt, how her chest tightened whenever his gaze lingered too long. By midday, they descended into a valley where mesquite and cottonwood clustered along a shallow creek. The land seemed peaceful, almost untouched by violence. But as they approached the water, movement stirred in the brush, voices. The chief halted, raising a hand. Ayana froze beside him. From the shadows emerged a group of riders, 4 men, 2 women, faces painted, spears and bows ready. Not raiders, natives, but not his tribe. The warriors fanned out, eyes narrowing as they took in the chief, his rifle, and Ayana at his side. One of the men barked in their tongue, his tone sharp, suspicious. Ayana understood fragments. "Why here? Who is she?" The chief answered in measured words, his voice calm but commanding. Ayana caught only pieces, but his stance told her everything. He was asserting his right to travel these lands, warning them not to interfere. One of the women dismounted, her eyes fixed on Ayana. She spoke directly to her, switching to broken English. "You not his blood? Why you walk with him?" The question pierced straight to her core. Ayana opened her mouth, then faltered. How could she explain that he had saved her, that he demanded her as the mother of his future child, that she both feared and trusted him, hated and leaned on him? She glanced at the chief. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned, as if daring her to speak truth. "I was taken by raiders," she said slowly, her voice trembling but clear. "He saved me. I walk because I choose." The woman's brows rose. The men muttered among themselves, exchanging dark looks. The chief's jaw tightened at Ayana's words, perhaps with pride, perhaps with warning. The leader of the small band, a tall man with feathers braided into his hair, stepped forward. His voice was sharp. "If you walk with him, you carry his war. His enemies will be yours." Ayana's stomach knotted. She knew he spoke the truth. Wherever the chief went, conflict followed. To stay with him was to choose a life of danger, of blood and fire. The chief's voice cut through the tension. "We carry enough enemies already. Leave your warnings and be gone." The tall man sneered. "You think yourself strong, but strength breaks when it stands alone. One day she will see." He cast Ayana a final glance, filled with both pity and scorn. Then he gestured, and the riders turned, disappearing into the trees. Silence fell heavy. Ayana's pulse thundered in her ears. She turned to the chief, her chest tight. "They were right," she whispered. "Your enemies are many. And if I stay," her voice cracked, "they will hunt me too." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. His eyes locked on hers, fierce but steady. "Yes, they will, but you will not stand alone." Her breath caught. The conviction in his tone shook her more than the encounter itself. He wasn't offering comfort, he was stating fact, and part of her believed him. That night, they camped near the creek. Ayana sat apart at first, staring at her reflection in the water. The woman's words echoed in her mind. One day, she will see. Would she? Would she wake to regret, to chains invisible but heavy all the same? The chief approached quietly, settling beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "I saw doubt in your eyes today." She clenched her fists. "Because they spoke truth. To walk with you is to live with war." His jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Yes, But to walk without me is to live with chains." Her eyes snapped to his. "Chains? You speak as though I am free now." His gaze did not waver. "Freedom is not the absence of burden. It is choosing which burden you carry." The words silenced her. She turned back to the water, her reflection wavering in the ripples. She hated the truth in his logic. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. "Then I choose to carry fire with you." The chief's eyes softened. Not much, but enough for her to see. He gave a single nod, as if her answer had sealed something far greater than the night around them. By the time they reached the chief's village, the desert sun had sunk low, bathing the earth in hues of crimson and gold. Smoke curled from the tops of lodges, children's laughter floated through the air, and the smell of roasted maize drifted on the wind. For Ayana, it was both familiar and foreign. Another tribe's home, another tribe's fire. The moment the chief entered, all eyes turned. Men paused mid-conversation, women halted their weaving, children stilled. But their gazes did not fix on him alone. They followed the line of his shadow until they landed on Ayana, trailing at his side. The murmurs began at once. "Who is she? Not one of us. Why does he bring her here?" Ayana's chest tightened. She kept her chin high, though every whisper cut like a blade. The chief's expression did not change. He walked with the same authority as always, his head held high, his stride steady. When they reached the center fire, he raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "This woman walks with me," he declared, his voice carrying through the camp. "She lives because I saved her. She stands because she fought beside me. From this day, she stands under my fire." The reaction was immediate. Some gasped, others scoffed. A few nodded in respect, but many turned away with narrowed eyes. An elder stepped forward, his hair white, his face lined with years of counsel. "Chief," he said, his voice sharp with disapproval, "our blood runs thin, yes, our children are few, but to bring an outsider, worse, a stranger of another people, into our fire, this is folly." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the circle. The chief's gaze hardened. "Folly is to let our fire die out because we fear the strength of others. This woman carries spirit enough to shame warriors. She is chosen." The elder's eyes snapped to Ayana, filled with disdain. "Chosen by whom? By the spirits or by your desire?" Heat rushed to Ayana's face. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but fear knotted her throat. She had no place here, no right to answer. Before she could gather her voice, another figure stepped forward, a young warrior, tall and broad, with fire in his eyes. "If she is chosen, let her prove it. Let her fight as one of us." The crowd stirred with excitement. Some jeered, others clapped. The elder nodded, satisfied. "Yes, if she stands under our fire, let her bleed for it." The chief's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "You would test her when she has already fought raiders by my side." The warrior sneered. "Your word alone is not enough. If she fails, we will know she is nothing but your weakness." Ayana's stomach twisted. All eyes bore into her, judging, doubting. She turned to the chief, her voice low, urgent. "I cannot fight your people." His gaze met hers, steady and fierce. "You can, you must. Not for me, for yourself. If you walk with me, they must see your fire." Her pulse thundered in her ears. Every instinct screamed to run, to vanish into the desert. But she remembered the woman by the creek, warning her she would one day see the truth. And she remembered the chief's words, "Freedom is choosing which burden you carry." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling but firm. "I will fight." The warrior grinned, stepping into the circle. The crowd pressed closer, anticipation crackling in the air. Ayana's bow was placed in her hands, the familiar weight both comfort and terror. The duel began at the elder's signal. The warrior lunged, spear in hand, his movements swift. Ayana dodged, loosing an arrow that grazed his arm. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He snarled, circling her, his strikes brutal, relentless. She stumbled, the edge of the spear slicing her shoulder, pain flashing hot, but she did not fall. Gritting her teeth, she rolled aside, snatching another arrow from her quiver. She remembered the chief's words, "Aim for the horse if you cannot strike the rider." Here, the horse was his legs. She loosed the arrow low, striking his thigh. He roared, collapsing to one knee. The crowd erupted in shouts. Some cheered, others hissed. Ayana raised her bow again, her arrow pointed at his chest. Her hands shook, her breath ragged, but her aim held steady. The warrior froze, rage burning in his eyes. He knew she had beaten him. The elder lifted his hand, his voice sharp. "Enough." Ayana lowered her bow slowly, her chest heaving. Silence fell heavy over the crowd. The chief stepped forward, his voice carrying, "You see her fire, you see her strength. She stands under my fire now, and none here will call her weakness again." Some nodded reluctantly, others turned away, but no one spoke against him further. That night, as the camp settled into uneasy quiet, Ayana sat by the fire, her shoulder bandaged, her body aching. The chief sat beside her, his presence steady. "You fought well," he said softly. She looked at him, her eyes fierce despite her exhaustion. "I fought because I had no choice." He met her gaze, unflinching. "Choice or not, you stood. And now, they cannot deny you." Her chest tightened. She knew he was right, but she also knew this was only the beginning. The fire in the center of the village burned low, embers glowing like watchful eyes. Ayana sat close, her shoulder bandaged, her bow resting at her side. Though exhaustion weighed on her, sleep would not come. Too many voices still echoed in her head, cheers, jeers, and the elder's sharp words. Is she chosen by spirits or by desire? Across the flames, the chief spoke quietly with the elders. His face was steady, his voice low, but Ayana could see the tension in the set of his jaw. Every decision he made, every word he spoke, was a stone placed on a fragile wall between unity and division. And she, an outsider, was now the crack that threatened to break it. When the council ended, he approached her. He lowered himself to the ground, his presence filling the space between them. "You fought with fire," he said. "They cannot deny it now." She hugged her knees tighter. "They may not deny it, but they do not welcome me." His gaze held hers, unyielding. "Respect comes before welcome, and fear comes before respect." The words chilled her, though she knew they carried truth. The following days revealed the truth of it even more. Some in the tribe nodded to her now, offering meat or water without disdain. Others turned their backs, muttering under their breath. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, eyes wide with curiosity, only to be pulled away. One evening, as Ayana fetched water from the creek, she felt eyes on her. She turned to find the young warrior she had defeated, his thigh still bound, his face shadowed with bitterness. "You humiliated me," he spat, his English rough but clear. Ayana straightened, her grip tightening on the bucket. "You challenged me. I fought. I survived." His sneer deepened. "You survived because the chief wanted you to. If I had struck true, he would have ended me before your arrow did. You are nothing but his shield." Her jaw clenched. "And yet, you still bear my arrow in your flesh." His eyes burned with hate. "You will never belong. You think you won today, but you only made enemies you cannot see." Before she could answer, he stalked away into the dark. That night, she told the chief. His expression hardened, but his voice remained calm. "Do not fear him. His pride is wounded. Nothing more." But Ayana was not convinced. She had seen the venom in the warrior's eyes. Pride wounded often turned to daggers in the dark. As days turned into weeks, she began to feel the weight of a different kind of battle. Not with raiders, not with hunger, but with suspicion. Every step she took seemed to test the tribe's patience. Every glance reminded her she was not of their blood. One afternoon, while tending to the horses, she overheard two women whispering, "She carries no child yet. What if she never does? Then she is useless. Nothing but weakness." The words struck like arrows. She turned away quickly, hiding the sting in her chest. That night, by the fire, she confronted the chief. "They doubt me. They doubt you. For choosing me." He studied her, his eyes steady. "Let them doubt. Doubt is not death." Her voice cracked. "And if I cannot give you what they demand, if I never bear this child you speak of." For the first time, she saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes. He looked away, his hand tightening on the hilt of his knife as though grasping for control. "Then I will bear the shame, not you." The answer should have eased her heart. Instead, it tangled it further. Shame did not fall on leaders alone. It spread, burning all it touched. The turning point came 2 nights later. Ayana awoke to whispers outside the lodge. She rose quietly, stepping into the cool night air. Shadows moved near the corral. 3 figures hushed, their shapes familiar. One was the young warrior. She crept closer, her breath shallow. "He weakens us," the warrior hissed. "Our chief fights too many battles. Now he brings her, an outsider. She divides us." Another voice, older, harsher. Then we end it. Not him, her. Without her, he loses his grip. Without her, the fire returns to us. Ayana froze, her chest tight. They were plotting against her. She slipped back inside, her heart hammering. The chief stirred as she entered, his hand already on his knife. "What is it?" he whispered. "They plan to kill me," she breathed, her voice breaking. For a long moment, silence filled the space. Then his eyes hardened, sharp as flint. "Then they are no longer my people." The village was restless the next day, though no one spoke openly of what Ayana had overheard. The whispers curled like smoke around her wherever she walked, eyes narrowing, hands pausing in their work, words cutting short as she passed. The weight of suspicion pressed heavy, and she felt the blade of danger in every shadow. The chief noticed. His gaze followed her often, sharper than usual, as though he too sensed the unease growing like weeds among his people, but he said nothing. Not yet. By nightfall, the tension broke. The central fire burned high. The tribe gathered in a wide circle for the evening council. Ayana sat near the edge, her hands clenched tight in her lap. The chief stood tall in the center, his voice carrying as he spoke of hunting grounds, of threats beyond the valley. His words were calm, commanding, until the young warrior rose to his feet. "She weakens us," he shouted, pointing a finger straight at Ayana. "So you bring her here, you call her chosen, but she is not of our blood. Since she came, the spirits turn from us. Our crops fail. Our children sicken. She is curse." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ayana's heart hammered. The chief's expression did not change, but his voice deepened with warning. "You speak of spirits to hide your pride. You lost to her in fair fight. That shame is yours alone." The warrior sneered, his face twisted with fury. "No, chief, that shame is yours, for letting her stand among us, a woman not of our people, a woman who has given you nothing." Ayana flinched. The words sliced deeper than any blade. She had fought, bled, endured, yet still, she was reduced to nothing. The elder stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Perhaps the spirits do send signs. Perhaps the fire grows weak under her shadow. We must decide if she stays or if she goes." The circle erupted with noise. Some shouted agreement, others shook their heads. Fear and anger collided in the flames. The chief raised his hand and silence fell. His eyes swept the crowd, hard as stone. "She stays. Under my fire. Under my word. That is the end." But the warrior would not yield. His hand went to his spear, his voice rising in challenge. "Then if she stays, let her life be tested by blood. If she falls, the curse ends. If she lives," his sneer curved, "then perhaps she is truly what you claim." The tribe roared with approval and protest alike. Ayana's stomach twisted. Another fight, another test. Would it never end? Before she could speak, the chief stepped forward, his voice thunderous. "No, if you thirst for blood, you take mine, not hers." The words stunned the circle into silence. Ayana's breath caught. He was offering himself in her place. The warrior's eyes widened, then narrowed with cruel delight. "So be it. Tonight, we see if you are still fit to lead." The crowd surged with energy, the firelight flaring as if feeding on the tension. Spears clashed, drums beat. The duel was set. Ayana's hands shook as she reached for the chief's arm. "You cannot do this for me," she whispered fiercely. His gaze met hers, steady, unflinching. "I do this for us, for the fire we carry. If I fall, you run. Do not look back." Her throat closed. She wanted to scream, to beg him to stop, but the circle had already closed around them. The duel began with a cry. The warrior lunged, spear flashing. The chief met him with knife and rifle, moving with a power born of years of battle. Sparks flew, dust rose. The crowd roared. Ayana's heart pounded with every clash, every strike. The chief fought like stone against storm, calm, relentless, unyielding. But the warrior was young, fast, reckless with fury. His spear grazed the chief's shoulder, drawing blood. The crowd shouted, half in triumph, half in dread. Ayana's nails dug into her palms. She wanted to close her eyes, but she could not. She watched, breathless, as the fight raged. At last, the chief caught the spear's shaft, twisting it free with brutal strength. He slammed the warrior to the ground, knife poised at his throat. Silence crashed over the circle. The chief's voice rang low, steady. "Yield!" The warrior's chest heaved, rage burning in his eyes. For a moment, Ayana thought he would resist, forcing the chief to kill him. But at last, he spat into the dust and growled, "I yield." The chief rose, tossing the spear aside. His gaze swept the crowd, sharp and final. "Let no one speak of curse again. She stands because I stand, and together we do not fall." The circle broke into murmurs, some respectful, others sullen. The elder's face was tight, unreadable, but no one challenged further. As the fire died down, Ayana moved to the chief's side. She touched his wounded shoulder, her voice breaking. "You risked everything, for me." He looked at her, his expression softer now, shadowed by pain and truth. "Not for you alone, for what we carry." Her chest tightened. She realized then that his fight was not only for his tribe, not only for legacy, it was for her too, for the bond that had begun as survival, but had grown into something neither of them could deny. The night air hung heavy with smoke and whispers, long after the duel ended. The tribe dispersed slowly, some murmuring approval, others muttering discontent, but all had seen the chief's blade at the warrior's throat, and none could deny his dominance. Still, Ayana knew the fight had not ended. The real battle was not only with raiders or warriors, but with doubt itself, festering like a wound in the hearts of the people. Inside the chief's lodge, the fire burned low, shadows flickering across the walls. Ayana sat close, grinding herbs between stones. Her hands trembled as she worked, but not from fear, from urgency. The chief sat beside her, stripped to the waist, his shoulder torn and bleeding from the duel. He had refused help from anyone else, allowing only her to tend his wounds. "You should not have fought for me," she said at last, her voice quiet but sharp. He winced as she pressed the poultice to his shoulder. "If I had not, they would have killed you." Her jaw tightened. "Then let them kill me. It is my burden, not yours." His eyes snapped to hers, fierce even through pain. "No, once I claimed you under my fire, your burden became mine. Your life is not yours alone anymore." The words silenced her. She pressed the herbs harder, watching blood seep into the cloth. "And what if I never give you what you want? What if no child comes?" For the first time, the chief faltered. His gaze drifted from her face, his chest rising and falling with a sigh. "Then I will still have stood for something, for you." Her hands stilled. The admission was quiet, almost reluctant, yet heavier than any demand he had made before. For so long, she had heard only his authority, his command, his need for legacy. But here, in the dim light, his voice carried something different, something dangerously close to devotion. Ayana swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She wanted to resist, to remind herself he had bound her fate without asking. Yet the truth was undeniable. He had risked his life not for tribe and not for spirits, but for her. "You are not the man I thought you were," she whispered. His eyes returned to hers, steady, dark, unflinching. "And what man am I?" Her breath trembled. "One who carries too much, one who hides sorrow behind stone, one who frightens me, because I do not know if I hate you or—" She stopped, the word caught in her throat. The silence stretched, thick as smoke. The chief leaned closer, his voice low, rough. "Hate me then, hate me if you must, but do not deny what burns between us." Her pulse thundered. She felt the heat of him, the weight of his gaze, the fire that seemed to bind them closer with every word. She wanted to turn away, yet her body betrayed her, leaning, trembling, drawn. At last, she pulled back, breaking the moment. Her hands busied themselves with tying the bandage. "Rest. Your body cannot take another fight tonight." His lips curved in a shadow of a smile. "And yet I fought the only one that mattered." She tied the knot tighter than necessary, earning a hiss of pain from him. "You are stubborn. And you," he countered, "are fire." Her chest tightened, her resolve slipping like sand through her fingers. She rose, turning away from him, but his words followed, heavy and certain. "You fear choosing me," he said. "But you fear more what it means if you do." She froze, her back to him, her fists clenched. His truth struck deeper than any blade. She did fear it, because choosing him meant more than survival. It meant surrendering the walls she had built around her heart, letting in the one man who could both save and destroy her. That night, she lay awake on the far side of the lodge, the fire dimming to embers. His breathing was steady, though she knew he did not sleep. Her heart beat loud, restless, caught between defiance and desire. She had come to fear his command. Now, she feared his tenderness even more. The village woke restless. The duel had ended, but the wound it left behind ran deeper than the chief's shoulder. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some praised his strength. Others claimed he had risked too much for a woman who did not belong. Every glance Ayanna felt carried judgment, some laced with grudging respect, others sharp with hate. By midday, scouts returned with grim news. Raiders were gathering again, more than before. Not a handful, not a dozen, closer to 50, enough to burn the entire valley to ash. The council gathered at once. The elders sat in a tight circle, their faces shadowed by firelight. The chief stood tall despite his wounds, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "They come for revenge, for the blood we spilled. If we stand divided, we are finished." An elder shook his head. "We cannot fight them. We are too few. Perhaps we must give them what they want." His eyes slid toward Ayanna. The words hit her like a stone. Her hands clenched into fists, her heart hammering. The chief's voice thundered in reply. "You would offer her like cattle. She is under my fire. To touch her is to touch me." But the elder pressed on. "Your fire is not the only one that burns here. Do you speak as chief for all or as man for her?" The tribe erupted into argument. Some shouted that the chief's word was law. Others hissed that Ayanna was a curse, that her presence had brought the raiders upon them. The noise rose, voices colliding like storm winds. Through it all, Ayanna sat still, her chest burning. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but every word would only fuel the fire. She was caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. That night the camp prepared for battle. Spears were sharpened, arrows bound, rifles checked. The chief moved among his people, issuing orders, steadying spirits. His presence was iron, unyielding, but Ayanna saw the truth in his eyes. He knew the odds. 50 raiders against their fractured tribe was near certain death. As the moon rose, he found her by the stream. She knelt by the water, staring at her reflection rippling in the dark. "They will not stop," she whispered. "Not until they have me." His shadow fell across her. "Then let them try." Her eyes lifted, fierce. "I cannot let you risk all your people for me. I should leave. Draw them away." His jaw tightened. "If you go, they will take you. They will break you. And the fire we fought to keep will die with you." Her throat closed. "Maybe that is better than watching your people die for me." For the first time, his voice cracked, low but raw. "Do not say that. You are not burden. You are not curse. You are the only thing that makes this fight worth standing." The words shattered her. For weeks she had wrestled with fear, anger, desire. Now, under the weight of his confession, she felt the walls inside her crumble. She reached for his hand, her voice trembling. "Then if we fight together. If they come for me, they will face us both." His grip tightened, rough but steady. In that moment, something passed between them. Not command, not desperation, but choice. For the first time, it was hers as much as his. The next dawn, the raiders came. Dust rose on the horizon like a storm. Horses thundered, rifles glinted in the sun. The tribe gathered in the clearing, weapons ready, faces painted with both fear and resolve. Ayanna stood among them, bow in hand, her heart steady despite the tremor in her limbs. The chief raised his rifle high, his voice carrying, "We stand as one. This valley is ours, our fire is ours, and no man takes it." The raiders charged. Arrows flew, bullets cracked, the earth shook beneath pounding hooves. The battle erupted in chaos, shouts, smoke, blood. Ayanna loosed arrow after arrow, her aim true, her spirit blazing. She saw raiders fall, saw warriors stumble, heard the cries of both triumph and pain. Beside her, the chief fought like a storm-given flesh, his blade flashing, his rifle thundering. He shielded her when bullets came too close, yet trusted her strength when his back was turned. For the first time, they were not captor and captive, not chief and outsider, but equals. Still, the raiders pressed hard. Their numbers crashed like waves against stone. The tribe began to falter, their circle breaking. The chief bled from fresh wounds, his body straining, but he did not fall. Ayanna's quiver emptied. She seized a fallen spear, fighting with desperate strength. Her breath burned, her arms ached, but she refused to yield. And then she saw him, the leader of the raiders, tall, scarred, eyes blazing with vengeance. His rifle lifted, aimed straight at the chief's chest. Time slowed. Ayanna's heart seized. She screamed his name. The battle raged like a storm tearing through the valley. Dust and smoke blurred the line between life and death, cries of pain mingling with the clash of steel. Ayana's chest burned with every breath, her arms trembling from the weight of the spear she swung against raiders pressing too close. But when her eyes locked on the leader, everything else fell away. He was a towering figure, his scarred face twisted with vengeance, his rifle raised, aimed squarely at the chief. Time seemed to slow, the roar of hooves, the screams, the crack of gunfire fading into silence. All Ayana saw was the moment that could end everything. "No!" she cried, her voice tearing through the chaos. Without thought, without hesitation, she ran. Her body moved faster than her mind, her feet pounding across the dirt. She hurled herself into the path of the raider leader just as his finger tightened on the trigger. The shot cracked, fire and smoke bursting from the barrel. Pain seared her arm as the bullet grazed deep, but she kept moving. With a cry, she drove her spear forward, straight into his chest. The raider's eyes widened, shock flashing before rage twisted his features. He staggered, clawing at the shaft buried in him, but she pushed harder, all the fire in her soul burning through that single strike. He fell. The raider leader crashed to the ground, the rifle slipping from his grasp, blood soaking the dust beneath him. For a heartbeat, the battlefield stilled. Raiders froze, their leader lifeless at their feet, disbelief spreading like wildfire. The chief, chest heaving, turned, his eyes locked on Ayana, bloodied, trembling, her arm bleeding, yet standing over the fallen enemy. Something fierce and unspoken passed between them. Then the tribe roared. Warriors surged forward with renewed fury, their spirits ignited by her act. Arrows rained, rifles cracked, spears struck true. The raiders, shaken and leaderless, faltered. Their formation broke, fear rippling through them like cracks in stone. "Drive them out!" the chief thundered, his voice booming above the din. With cries that shook the valley, the tribe pushed the raiders back. Horses bolted, men stumbled, chaos turned to retreat. Within minutes, the enemy who had threatened to erase them scattered into the desert, their dust trails fading into the horizon. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged breaths of survivors. Bodies lay strewn across the clearing, blood darkening the soil. Smoke curled from shattered torches, the air heavy with the weight of victory and loss. Ayana swayed, her knees buckling. Pain throbbed in her arm, darkness edging her vision. She felt herself falling until strong hands caught her. The chief lowered her gently to the ground, his face carved with both fury and fear. "Why would you do this?" he demanded, his voice breaking. Her lips curved faintly, even as pain stole her strength. "Because you would have fallen. And if you fought, the fire dies." His eyes blazed, the steel of a leader giving way to something raw, more human. He pressed his hand to her wound, his jaw tight. "You are fool," he whispered hoarsely. "Fool to risk yourself, fool to bind yourself to me." Her breath trembled. "Then we are both fools." For the first time since she had met him, the chief's expression broke. His eyes shone not with command, but with something she had never seen, fear of loss, not for tribe, not for legacy, but for her. The tribe gathered slowly, their faces turned toward the pair. Whispers spread. "She struck the leader down. She saved him. She carries fire." The elder who had once doubted her stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "The spirits have spoken. She is no curse. She is strength. Without her we would have fallen." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the warriors. No one dared speak against it. Ayana had proven herself not with words, but with blood. The chief met her gaze, his hand still steady on her wound. His voice softened, a rare tremor in its depth. "You have bound yourself to me, not by my command, but by your choice." Her eyes fluttered, exhaustion pulling at her. Still, she found the strength to whisper, "Then let it be so." And in that moment, amid the smoke and silence of victory, she realized her fate was no longer stolen. It was chosen. The valley was quiet at last. Where hours earlier, screams and gunfire had torn the air, now only the wind whispered through the sage. The ground still bore the scars of battle, scorched earth, broken weapons, blood darkened into the soil, but the tribe still stood. They had not been erased. At the center of the camp, Ayana lay in the chief's lodge, her wounded arm bound with herbs and cloth. Pain lingered, but strength slowly returned. She stirred, waking to find the chief sitting near the fire, his broad frame outlined against the glow. He had not slept. When her eyes opened, his gaze shifted to hers, and for the first time since she had met him, his expression softened fully. No mask of command, no shield of authority, only the raw truth of a man who had nearly lost her. "You should rest," she whispered, her voice faint but steady. He shook his head. "I will rest when I know you are safe." Her chest tightened. For weeks, she had resisted him, feared him, argued against the path he laid before her. But now, after blood had sealed their bond, she understood. His demands had never been about ownership. They had been about survival. And in saving him, she had chosen survival not only for herself, but for him, for all of them. Outside, the tribe gathered quietly, their voices low, their eyes turned toward the chief's lodge. Whispers no longer carried scorn, but reverence. "She struck down the raider leader. She saved the chief. She carries the fire." The elder, who once called her a curse, entered at dawn. He bowed his head, not deeply, but enough to mark respect. "The spirits have shown us truth," he said. "She is no outsider now. She is the heart of our fire." Ayana felt the weight of his words, both gift and burden. To be accepted meant carrying responsibility. To be named heart of their fire meant her life was no longer her own. But when her eyes met the chief's, she knew it was not a chain. It was choice. As days turned into weeks, the village rebuilt. Men hunted, women wove, children played without fear. The scars of battle remained, but beneath them life grew again. And at the center of it all stood the chief and Ayana, side by side, no longer divided by doubt. At night, they sat together by the fire. He told her of his lost son, of the grief that had hardened him. She told him of her family, of the sisters she feared she would never see again. They shared not just burdens, but dreams. Slowly, the walls between them crumbled, until what remained was not captor and captive, but two souls bound by the fire they had chosen to carry. One evening, as the stars burned bright over the canyon, he turned to her, his voice low. "You once asked why I chose you, now you know." She met his gaze, unsteady and sure, "And I chose you back." The words sealed more than their bond. They sealed the future of the tribe. No longer was he only chief, and she the outsider. Together, they became symbol and strength, a living fire no raider could extinguish. In time, stories of that night spread beyond the valley. Tales of the outsider who struck down the raider leader, of the chief who fought not just for blood, but for love, carried across camps and tribes. And with each retelling, the fire grew brighter. For Ayana, life had begun with loss, fear, captivity, but it had led her to a choice that gave meaning to all she had endured. To stand not alone, but beside the one who had carried both sorrow and hope, and to know that her life was not curse, but blessing. The chief once told her, "Freedom is choosing which burden you carry." Now, as she looked at the tribe thriving, at the children laughing, at the fire that burned strong at the heart of their camp, she knew her burden was not weight, it was purpose, and for the first time, she did not fear it. In the end, their story was not about conquest or command. It was about two lives scarred by loss, bound together not by chance, but by choice. They carried the fire through blood and battle, proving that survival is not only about strength, it is about standing together when the world tries to tear you apart. If this story touched you, remember, true strength is not in standing alone, but in choosing who you will carry the fire with. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of resilience, sacrifice, and love born from struggle. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story too.